Here we go, back on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Super excited. We go through the summer. Summer's a little tough. If you're here, I appreciate that, because summer, we have less listeners because there's more things going on. Maybe you just got done watching the Olympic trials. Maybe you're doing a camp. Hopefully, if you're a coach, you're taking vacation, spending time with family and friends, passions and charities. So just grateful for you working through us here in the summer as we continue to go through season 5 here at the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Super excited. We were talking before we hit record. Sometimes these are easier and sometimes these are harder. Today's guest is actually someone I've known for a long time. I consider him a friend. That can make it harder sometimes because I know a lot of his history, but I've got to act like I don't and ask those questions. So let's get into it. Help me welcome the head coach of the Bobcats from Sam Houston State University, the wise, the wonderful Mr. David Self. David, how are you?
I'm going to get you first on right there.
What's that?
Bearcats, not Bobcats. That's okay. That's Texas State.
Bearcats.
Get it a lot.
Oh.
We're the weird ones that spell it with a K.
That's right. First of all, you graciously gave me a shirt that says Bearcats, so and a sweatshirt, so I should know that. 2, I love mascots. Like, I kind of like being the guy who knows all the mascots. And literally I was like, oh, I'm going to impress everybody. I'm going to tell them, no one knows Sam Houston. It's the Bobcat. I know it's the Bobcat. It's like, no, it's the Bearcats, for crying out loud. God.
Yeah. So sorry. I don't want to start off like that, but
no, I do love how you said that. You go, I've got your first correction already. It's like, oh, you're expecting to be several. You're like, here's the first one.
No. So
I appreciate that. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm doing good. I'm trying to kind of get to the dog days of summer. The longer I'm in this profession, the fewer of those that come around, and those are really needed this time of year. But before we get started, I just want to take a minute and just want to thank you personally for what you do for our sport, for our profession, for track and field. It is such you're a wonderful asset to what we do. And I don't think people thank you enough for what you do. You're not just a guy that's trying to sell Gill athletic equipment. You generally love the sport and want to see the sport grow. And you are a resource. I'm telling you, I get some of those tweets and emails from you. And I mean, they are truly a godsend, because there's times when we as track coaches need to hear that, because we beat ourselves up quite a bit. And just knowing there's someone like you outside that appreciates what we do. Thank you, Mike. I really want you to know that is a sincere thank you, and I appreciate what you do, and I want people to understand, just how much you mean to the sport.
That means a lot. I appreciate that. You deserve it, first and foremost. And I have now, this is 2024, so I coached college track for 10 years, so I always kind of have a love and affinity for the profession of coaching track and field. Coach high school for a couple of years as well. After a detour in Las Vegas, came here to Gill, and certainly loved my job for the first 10 years. I've been here 18 now. My first 10 years of serving coaches with equipment, and then 8 years ago ish, it kind of changed, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, I don't sell track equipment. I sell like comfort. What I do allows you to go coach more. And I know you continue, and you being the general, you and the coach sense, have more and more on your plate every day. Never could have seen, what we were dealing with today in 2024 back in 2014, but whatever.
No.
I might've gotten out at the right time. But here in the past, maybe 5 years, I have definitely taken another shift and said, you know what, I'm going to, not to overstate this, but I'm going to put the profession of coaching, the men and women who choose to be track and field coaches, on my shoulders. And I'm going to go to the mountaintop and scream to anybody who will listen about how awesome you people are. And, it's more than, it's amazing to watch. We just got done. By the time you're listening, you'll have been done with Olympic trials. We're in the middle of it right here when we're recording. We're getting ready to go to Paris. We just had NCAA championships, Nike high school nationals. We see all these amazing results. I mean, come on, we got 16-year-olds or 14, however old Quincy is, running 44s and things 16, like that.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, but that's secondary to me, and it's secondary to you and to the society. About what you guys and gals are really doing is you are producing men and women who will go on, most are not going to go on to be college track athletes. Most are not going to go on to become elite post-collegiate professional athletes, but they're all going to go on to be moms, dads, business owners, teachers, coaches, clergy, etc. And that, when we look at the participation rates that you guys are continuing to build up here in the sport, that is the greatest asset you will do for our society. And that is what I will continue to yell to anybody. It's like, man, you think track coaches are just out there doing repeat 400s and mile, whatever, dude, it is
Yeah.
so much greater than that. So David, thank you so much for those kind words. I do. I really appreciate that. It's always, nice to be recognized with that. I can certainly say, especially through social media, I hear a lot of feedback of that, and I'm always grateful when it's recognized. And so thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
You deserve it.
That's my line. Thank you.
I know. I stole it from you.
Okay, well, I certainly publish enough podcast episodes that I'm on as bonus materials here. So no one came here to listen to me. We came here to learn about you, my friend. So let's hop in our Wayback Machine here. Why don't we start with, David, somewhere, assuming you were an athlete, we've had plenty of coaches that were not track athletes or even athletes at all. Where does track and field, where does it begin for you?
Well, as just about every young athlete growing up in the state of Texas, I was a football player, multiple sport athlete. My dad was an athlete growing up, so he encouraged me to do multiple things. So I was a football, baseball kind of track guy a little bit. I was quicker than the average kid that, grew up in the woods of East Texas. So, did a little bit of running. Baseball was really kind of something I love to do because that was my dad's passionate sport. He loved baseball, and we grew up watching baseball games. And I found out very early on in my baseball career, around age 13, 14, 15, when it starts to get serious, that I couldn't hit anything that was not a fastball. And so I don't think I saw a number one for the rest of my career in baseball. Everybody threw trash at me, and for some reason, I don't know why, I couldn't hit it. So,
They call pitchers, this is a kind of derogatory towards pitcher, a one pitch pitcher, right? They can only pitch one thing. Do they call batters one pitch hitters? Like you could only hit one pitch, which is not a good thing?
No, they just call guys that can only hit one pitch bench warmers. I mean, so, I was, I played in the outfield. I could run anything down. I had a pretty good arm, but, it was pretty much a given that, oh, here comes Self. Throwing the number two, I got nothing but big looping roundhouse curveballs that I just, for some reason, I couldn't track them. It just had me mesmerized.
Isn't that amazing? So, I mean, that's really kind of interesting. Obviously a good player. And here's a, overall a major flaw because it's a big part of the game, but it is only one part of the game. And for some reason, just couldn't track it, huh? Just couldn't
track it.
That's crazy.
And back then, and we're talking, this is we're going to date ourselves here. This is 1982, 83, 84. There was no travel ball. There were no private coaches. You played area, youth, city rec, whatever you want to call it, baseball. And you had the volunteer coaches. So there was nobody to go, okay, I need to teach this guy how to learn how to hit a curveball because, he can steal bases like there's no tomorrow. He can run anything down in the outfield. He's got a good enough arm, but unless he just stands in and gets hit by a pitch, he's not going to get on base. So, that kind of went. And so my love of baseball kind of, it started to fade a little bit. I started to get to be a much better track and field athlete. So I started kind of going that direction in high school of really not even really worried about high school baseball and just ran high school track. I still played baseballs in the summers for city stuff, but and then in high school, I had a pretty serious, it was in my church gym. We were playing around. We used to do Friday nights after football games. We'd go in there and playing around in my church gym. And long story short, I broke my left arm in about 12 places. And so that's kind of what ended my football career. I had some fairly significant nerve damage in my left hand, so I couldn't really catch football as well. And that's what guys that are fast do is you run and they throw the ball downfield. So, and so really just kind of decided, in my junior year of high school after that season that like, maybe this football thing's not going to work out for me. I was having some issues with it. So I just went track full time, and that's, I I was a late bloomer. Absolutely. I was, I turned 18 like 2 days before I graduated high school. So I was decent in track. I was a hurdler. I wasn't a good hurdler probably until the last 4 track meets of my high school career. But that was enough to get the attention of a couple of the smaller mid-major coaches in the area down in the Southeast Texas area. I ended up going to Lamar University, and there was some. My entire family's from Beaumont, so it made sense. I had a sport group there, and I had 2 cousins that were my age that were also going to Lamar, so it just made sense. But I got the opportunity to run track there.
So let's pause there. First of all, the Redbirds, right? Lamar.
The Cardinals, yep.
Yeah, all right. Well, I was close enough. Yeah, Redbird. Okay,
yeah, good enough. Yeah,
yeah, I'm good enough. Yeah. I love Trey down there. He does a fantastic job.
He is my best friend.
So, is that right? Oh man,
we ran track together at Lamar, and so
he
stood at my wedding when I got married. I mean, so Trey and I are.
I love him a lot. Cool. Yes. I love hearing that. All right. So stay in high school here with me. One is, I was kind of made me think about, I think a lot about multi-sport athletes for many reasons, right? One is, I think football players should run track and because that'll help track and all that kind of things. But I just think, they're better overall people. When I mean better overall people, meaning they're better off because they do multiple sports.
Sure.
It just made me think, because we get wrapped up into our identity, especially as a high schooler. It's easy to get wrapped up into our identity of something that we're good at. So a sport typically. And so, maybe you started wrapping your identity into being a baseball player at first, and then that started waning off. And that can affect a kid. It can affect an adult. Sure. Then you'd be like, oh, I'm a football player. Okay, that's fine. And I run track. Then you get hurt real bad and pretty much ends your football career. Like it just kind of hit me like, man, thank God you also had track, because it's like, okay, at least you don't go into despair of like, well, I can't do anything,
I can't do anything. Sure.
Right. So I love that you had that track background. Talk to us about when you think about high school, your time at high school for track and field, and it could be other sport coaches as well. Was there a coach that, thank goodness that coach and I clicked, or that coach and I,
absolutely. It was my track coach in college, and I was very fortunate in that my track coach at Conroe High School, Jerry Carter, we're still friends to this day. And I, without a doubt, 100%, Jerry Carter is the reason I am a track coach today.
Oh, wow. How so?
And I say that unapologetically and proudly. I was very fortunate in that I had a track coach for a coach. It wasn't his secondary sport. All he did was coach cross country and track and field. That's what he did. He went to Rice University in the 70s. He was a long jumper, helped them win a Southwest Conference championship. Wow. So I was very blessed to have someone who knew track and could instill in me some sound training principles and a love of the sport beyond just run hard, turn left. Made me a fairly decent hurdler. I was a regional qualifier and did some things that was enough to get me noticed in that way. But 100%, Jerry Carter he's the reason I'm a coach today.
Well, so it's funny. Most people are going to listen to this podcast and not go to YouTube, and that's fine. But if you are watching on YouTube, did you see his face light up when he talked about Coach Carter, though, by the way? Like, I love that. That's, to me, when I was talking earlier about, the real impact, the positive impact coaches make, that's the impact right there. When your athletes hear your name, or later on, 20 years, 30 years down the line, when they think about David Self or you as that you're listening, that's the face that lights up. That's the impact you make on people. It's amazing. I love that. So what was it, as you're thinking back, obviously there's maybe a lot of stories or a lot of, movies that are playing in your head of, things that happened during the time when you were with Coach Carter. What was it about Coach Carter? You speak so highly of him. That's why I got into coaching, you said. Was it his style, meaning like, was he the dictator in your face and that's what you needed kind of guy, or the opposite? Was it his knowledge? You're like, oh man, I could just listen to this guy all day because I just soak it up. What was it about him and his style?
I would have to say it was probably a combination of things. And just, not that this mattered, but in my younger life, my family moved around a lot. My father had some pretty serious health issues. So I wouldn't say stability wasn't an issue, but it was just, we didn't we lost our family home because of some health issues. And so we moved around a lot. I ended up living 2 doors down from him for about 3 years. And, so that kind of helped establish some things, but mostly it was a combination of, he went to Rice, so he was a smart cookie,
Right.
I mean, no doubt about that. Just general knowledge. He was intelligent. He was intense and serious, but he also liked to have fun.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I've carried over into my coaching as well, especially as I get older. I'm much more on the let's have fun end, but he probably did some things that you can't get away with today.
Mhm.
And nothing that scarred me or triggers me. It's like, I actually think those are great things. There were a couple of times I had to kind of step back and think, okay, why am I doing this?
Mhm.
Am I really, he was good at getting your attention.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was some methods that would be considered a little harsh today, but that's okay, but he was demanding, and he had expectations, but he was also very loving, very caring, he loved track and field. He loved track and field. And I can remember, we didn't have a lot of support from our area for track and field back in, I went to a large 5A, which was the largest classification in Texas at the time, high school. I had 700 something people in my graduating high school class. We were a big high school, but we only had 10 guys on the varsity track team.
Oh, wow.
That was it. That was it.
You had a graduating class of 700 plus. That means 28. You probably had 3,000 plus because there's attrition, right?
There were almost 4,000 people in our high school.
And you had 10 kids on the team.
Because we were all about playing football. It was, that's what it was. And back then it was, if you were an athlete, you had to be in football.
Normally I would have said, wow, Coach Carter, what are you doing? But obviously, he seemed very enigmatic. Is that the right word? Like people would be drawn to him. So, wow. Sure. So there had to be something culturally. So it was football, first, second, and third.
Football, and they were not encouraged to run track. They were encouraged, because in Texas, we don't have PE in high school. If you're an athlete, you're in an athletic period.
Right. And
so unless you did a sport full time, you were in off-season football or the football athletic period.
So were you kind of, I've always wanted to say this to you, David. So were you kind of the oddball then because you did do other sports, including track?
Well, people did other sports, but it was just kind of that, okay, in the spring, you're going to go play baseball because you can go do that after off-season football practice.
Right.
And that's really what everybody did, or they were in off-season football, because in Texas, we have spring training. We actually have a football game. It gets to be a little, but that's the Friday night lights.
Right.
I grew up with it. I was a part of it. So it's like, I'm not knocking it.
Yeah.
It's just, it is what it was. We were right down the road from the Woodlands High School, completely opposite. And they probably had 60 guys on their high school track team.
Right.
And they had the same situation. Coach Dan Green there was a track coach.
Right.
And it was just how we did things.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. Okay, well, shout out to Coach Carter. I love that. Again, that is the story you just told about him. That's the exact reason that I will continue to yell and shout for the profession of coaching track and field, the men and women who choose to be coaches, because that's the impact you make. It's much bigger than how great your 4x4 team is. I love it. Okay. So you already told us you're going to Lamar. As you were going in, as you're looking at different colleges and you settle on Lamar, which seemed to be you met your best friend and obviously had family support there. What were you thinking? You're 18 years old. What are you thinking I'm going to become a fireman. These are all the things I thought of as an 18-year-old. I'm going to become an English teacher. What did you go in thinking? And was track coaching at all in your mind at that point?
It was kind of in the background a little bit, but to be honest with you, as I started, my goal was to go into the Marine Corps and be a pilot. That's what I wanted to do. I started off as an engineer, an engineering major. Okay. Cal 2 took care of that for me. I took second semester in calculus and I was like, no, not going to do this.
Cal 2's got a heck of a body count, doesn't it?
Oh man. You can kind of get through, Cal 1, and I took the same guy for Cal 1 and Cal 2. And he was, this is still back in the 80s. All right. So it's a different time. Basically my instructor he was ancient. He was old back then. And so and I'm not kidding you. He's like, all right, we're in a lecture hall, and there were probably 65 of us or so in the class, and we're in a mid-sized lecture hall, and he's like, I don't mind you smoking in class, but just make sure you stay at the top of the lecture hall if you're going to smoke. You could do that back then.
We used to have smoking sections in airplanes as well, so this
Yes,
is not that
exactly.
surprising, actually. Yeah.
He had a bad back, and this was all chalkboards, and so he couldn't, and if you have any people that know, when you get into, the more advanced mathematics, you get into derivatives and things, and they go on and on and on. Well, he couldn't bend down in order to write on the bottom of the chalkboard. So he got very good at, he would write a line, he would write the second line, and as he started the third line, he's erasing the first. And he would just go back, and you had to be able to keep up with
Quick.
him.
Yeah.
Oh, it was terrible. And if you got lost, you just put your pencil down, and hopefully somebody around you could help catch you up. So anyway, I got out of Cal 2 with I think I made like a 78 or something like that. And I was like, there is no way I'm taking 5 more math classes.
Yeah, it only gets harder, right?
I don't, Cal 3, Cal 4, differential equations, discrete mathematics. And one of them I don't even remember the name of now. I was like, I don't see that happening. So on top of that, Mother Nature kind of helped out a little bit. My eyes started to go bad. And, Uncle Sam doesn't give you a $30 million jet unless you have perfect vision. So I spent about a year in school, kind of not knowing what I was going to do. And then ended up, kind of deciding, okay, kind of the kinese end, the sports science end. It wasn't too far a stretch for me to get into that. And so I changed my major to that. And really wasn't expecting to be a coach. At the time, corporate fitness was a huge thing. That's the direction we were going in. I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a school teacher coach. I like the idea of coaching, but not the idea of teaching school. And God bless them, I'm married to a teacher. Those if there is anyone who is bedrock to our society,
amen.
School teachers. I didn't see me being able to do that. So I got a degree in exercise science, basically a non-certified degree from Lamar University. And in my last year of eligibility, I graduated before my eligibility was done. And I was married at the time and trying to kind of, figure out my adult life, the direction I was going to go. I was starting graduate school. I was offered a graduate assistant position teaching in the kinesiology department at Lamar. And it was a full old school GA position. I mean, I taught 4 classes. I got a fairly large chunk of salary. I even had some benefits to it. It was a really good situation, especially for a young guy that's newly married. Come back, and the amount of money I was getting from Lamar was more than a scholarship. So basically NCAA regulations came in. They were like, hey, you have to choose. I was at the end of my career. I had been hurt several times in college. My body was not cooperating with me. I just had foot surgery the year before. And so it was just like, I made a decision. Hey, I'm going to be able to keep this little bit of track scholarship I have, keep the GA position, but help out and just be a student coach. And found my calling. I knew. I mean, in a semester, it was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do.
All right, put a pin in that. I love that. Okay. Real quick, through your college career as a track athlete, did you stay as a hurdler primarily?
Yes, I did.
Through high school and college, you probably did other events, whether it's here and there, or maybe you had a primary, secondary event. Which is the best event that you enjoy doing, and why are the hurdles the best event in the world?
The 110 hurdles don't hurt.
That's cool. Until they do, by the way.
Until you crash and have to have foot surgery. So, but I just love the hurdles. I love the aggressiveness of it. You can kind of take it out on the hurdles. I kind of understood it. I kind of became a student of it, and I was pretty explosive, so I was a little better at this. Back then, we ran the 55 hurdles than I ran the 55 hurdles. I was pretty good at that. Pretty explosive guy. I didn't even know why I breathe. My body has zero aerobic capacity. Zero. I cannot tolerate lactate at all. I am one of those guys that at about at about 300 meters, I look like I'm running in wet concrete. I mean, it's just brutal. And my we know the story behind this, you and I do, but I'm in my second marriage now, and I'm actually married to a lady that I ran track with at Lamar. So it's something that we can get into in a little bit. But
Yeah.
she was a 400 hurdler, and she remembers me having to do some of those 400-meter workouts. She's like, I couldn't bear to watch that.
She's like, I was embarrassed for you.
Oh, I used to read the workout and start getting sick. Like, oh no, here it comes. So, I ran 400 hurdles at the conference meet because I did what I needed to do for the team, trying to help out. But it was kind of like a train wreck. You couldn't tear yourself away, but it was hard to watch.
The slogan of track and field is you cannot beat genetics. So
No, you cannot.
stick to the highs. Stick to the
Cannot beat
highs.
genetics.
All right. You said, you started student coaching, and your face really lit up here when you said, "Oh, I found my calling." Knowing it was a little bit of time ago, David, but what was it? What do you remember? Was there a certain incident, a certain workout, a certain cue you gave, the sense of responsibility of now you're helping others, not just,
Sure.
how do I become better? What was it that you found your calling?
Okay. So I'm going to have to choose my words wisely, but I want to, if it comes out the wrong way, I'm going to come back and backtrack and correct myself if I don't say it right.
Yeah.
I really became a student of the sport. And it's kind of funny because, and I don't suggest doing this, but Lamar University, they get some alumni money from me, so I've paid for it. I used to go to the resource section in our library and check out techniques. Back it was in Track and Field Quarterly Review. And I'm not proud of this, but I did it. I used to bring an X-Acto knife, and I would find articles, and I would cut them out of the magazine. I was the only person reading them at Lamar, and I still have binders literally of articles that were cut out from, some of the foundational coaches that I grew up with in the 70s and 80s.
You still have the evidence is what I'm hearing. What's the statute of limitations on this?
Hopefully it's passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are old articles that I cut out from the TAC manual that I've highlighted and wrote notes on. And I was doing that as an undergraduate.
Did you do that? Like when you think about your academics in high school, when you think about the math classes you're taking, so that's a very studious thievery, but you're taking notes, you're highlighting, you're trying to put it all together and how you're going to communicate it. Were you doing that with your other academics, or?
Yeah, I was a pretty good student.
Okay. All right. So this is kind of your nature in that sense.
Sure. A little background on this is that I was the first person in my family to ever graduate college. Now here's the kicker. Okay. My dad was a computer programmer for the space program in Houston.
Wow. That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that was a chip on his shoulder, is that he never finished his degree. And so some of the electrical engineers would kind of look down on him a little bit. And my dad was a very, very old school guy, very old school guy. I was brought up, he did not spare the rod. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. But my father was ridiculously smart, a mathematical genius. He could, for those that know computer stuff, and you know what Pascal and Fortran are, those are the original languages. He could just spit it out. He could think it in his brain. He didn't have to refer to manuals. He was the fix-it guy at the space program. He came on in the Apollo program in 1967, right after they had the accident for Apollo 1, and he was in charge of rebuilding the Apollo capsule and redesigning it. So he was in charge of all the life support on the Apollo capsule up until the umbilical detached from the Saturn V rocket.
Wow.
So, he used to joke, because they were alive when the umbilical detached. I did my job, not my fault. But he was the guy, when the engineers couldn't figure it out, they would come to him, bring him a carton of cigarettes and a pot of coffee and go, hey, we can't figure this out.
Yeah.
He would come back 4 hours later and, look, here's where your mistake was. He was that guy.
Very smart.
Long story short, he had a chip on his shoulder about not going to school. My brother, who was 10 years older than I was, when my dad had his health problems, had to drop out of college, get a job working offshore on an oil platform. I mean,
Mm.
19 years old, what can you do and make a lot of money? Well, the oil
Mhm.
boom was going in the early 80s. He could go make ridiculous amounts of money working offshore.
Wow.
And so he dropped out of school. That's how we ended up moving from Pasadena, Texas to, I literally lived in a town called Cut and Shoot, Texas. I kid you not. So look it up. It's for real. I
Wow.
mean, you want to talk about culture shock. So at any rate,
Yeah.
once I got to school, my dad was very, very adamant. You are going to graduate college, and
Mhm.
feared me full of scary stories. And, they're going to flunk you out of school. They're going to run you out of. So
Mhm.
I wasn't that very studious in high school, but when I had the opportunity at college, I kind of recognized, okay, this is something that changes the trajectory of my life. So I was a pretty good student.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was it when you found that track? You're going to the library, you're getting the quarterly now techniques from
Mhm.
USTFCCA. It's what a great resource. I mean, if you're
Hmm.
literally, if you, I don't know, this is probably I hate ultimatums, but if you're not reading those, you're doing yourself a disservice. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely.
Like there's such great
Absolutely.
stuff from minds of our coaches in those magazines. And I used to love I love that quarterly. I remember that just
Yep.
black and white. I mean, it was like
Yep.
stapled together, the cheapest thing in the
Yeah.
world. But man, it was so valuable. Oh my
Hmm.
goodness, so good. All right, so your student coaching, what does that look like for you? Because I'm always interested in typically it's when we do a more traditional GA, as far as sports, but
Hmm.
I'm always concerned when a kid on Friday is on the track team as part of the team. He's a hurdler. And then on Monday, he's now coach to the exact same dudes and dudettes that were on the team.
Sure.
How did you handle that transition?
Yeah. It was fairly easy because I had already been doing a little bit of that stuff as an athlete, is
Mhm.
trying to help people out. Um, I was from an old school program, and I learned many great things from my coaches in college. So I don't want to come across the wrong way, but we were old school. Practice was at 2 o'clock. Everybody on team showed up at 2.
Mhm.
And if you were someone that ran 400 hurdles, 110, 100 hurdles, 100, 200, everybody did the same workout.
Mhm.
We just showed up and did the same workout. And it was, by the time I got to my later years in school, it was, if you're a hurdler, go work on hurdles, because our head coach was, and we only had two coaches at the time for men and women, full teams. That's how it was back then. Is the head coach did 800 and above. The assistant coach, who was a jumps guy, ran the sprints program that the head coach had written. And he was a great guy. He was working, doing things he could, but he wasn't a hurdle guy. So we kind of had to fend for ourselves, which
Right.
was very common back then. This was not anything. I mean, most programs only had two, maybe three coaches, maybe three.
Mhm.
Um, so I was already kind of doing some of that stuff, but these were my friends. We had a very uh, tight knit group of people. And so when we kind of understood that, okay, Dave's not running anymore, he's going to start helping out. It was a pretty easy. I took it as a student coach. I was more so, hey, these are the things I'm seeing. I wasn't, obviously, I couldn't have been a disciplinarian to them, because
Right.
6 weeks ago, you and I were doing the same thing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You saw me leaning over the fence, throwing up my lunch. So, so,
Yeah.
but I took it that end, and I've obviously when I went somewhere different for the first time, it became a little different.
Yeah.
I didn't finish my graduate work at Lamar. I ended up there's a hiatus in there of me actually coaching high school for a year and deciding right then and there, okay, I'm not a high school coach. It's not going to work. So I went, and that's how I ended up at Sam Houston. I came here to finish my graduate work,
Okay.
and I was a same thing. I taught in the Kines department here, and
Wow.
I was, first year I was the volunteer assistant for the track team. Then, the next year I got a little money, and then right after that I got hired out at Garden City Community College in
So
August 1986 or 1996.
so I know it was brief, but let's talk about that
Okay.
semester of coaching high school. Because I'm always interested, it's really interesting. There's I can't remember the actual words to the fable or whatever it is, but they talk about crabs and ants. Have you ever heard? Does it sound
No.
familiar? Yeah, okay. So ants, when they encounter something going wrong will band together. Like you may have seen like on nature shows or social media where ants were, they'll get into a ball to protect themselves, or
Yes.
they'll create a bridge of
The
bodies so
bridge.
that, yeah, things like that,
Yeah.
right? And then there is the opposite of that, and that's crabs. And when crabs, like if you take a bunch of crabs into like a big boiling pot, when one crab is like climbing on all the other crabs to get out, and is almost there, like almost about to save themselves and get out of the bucket, another crab will grab that crab and bring them back
Yeah.
into the water. And sometimes, because I sit in a very unique seat for coaches, for track and field coaches, since I'm not coaching anymore, I get to, I do much more observing than, I do none of the application anymore. And sometimes it feels like there's a lot of that infighting amongst our coaches. And one of those infightings that I see quite often, I shouldn't say that I see at times, is college coaches versus high school coaches. Not I don't necessarily see it in a belittling side of like, oh, you only coach high school, listen to me. Sometimes that happens, and that's just bad ego. That's, I don't think that's the
Yeah.
profession. But I do sometimes see it where, a college coach doesn't know what a high school coach goes through. They only see the coaching side. By the
Oh,
way,
yeah.
the reverse is true as well. I think high school coaches only
Sure.
see college and think, oh, that's all you do, so you should be much better because that's all you
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
And college coaches will look at high school coaches like, how come, you're not spending, how come you don't know how to coach sprinters more, better? Why don't you go to this class and do this and that? And it's like, bro, I teach 8 hours a day. I teach kinesiology,
Yeah.
I teach,
Yeah.
math to high schoolers. Oh, and I'm
Exactly.
married and I got kids or what, there's so much going on. So what I'm interested, because you had the experience, and obviously the high school side um, uh, showed you, yeah, this isn't for me.
Mhm.
What was it? I would, I don't know if I would agree because I did both. I'm not sure. It's been so long ago, but what was it
Yeah.
for you that was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure.
It was definitely classroom. It was a classroom altercation. And I say classroom. I was doing some basically how I ended up in high school is I was a long-term sub.
Mhm.
My wife at the time was pregnant with our son. And so it was like, okay, Dave, you can't chase your career. You've got a child on the way. You need to make money. You need to do some things for your family.
Mhm.
And so I was a long-term sub in a school district in Northwest Houston that turned into a full-time position. Um, so I taught some drafting classes and I taught some PE classes because I kind of filled in for it was a brand new high school back then. We didn't even have a senior class yet. So it was a brand new school. So anyway, long story short, there was an altercation in a PE class where it got way out of control, where a student literally, and luckily I was okay, but literally verbally accosted me, entered my personal space, was threatening me, and knew that I couldn't do anything, and I was in complete control, but I was mad.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like, okay, if this happens eventually, there's going to be a reaction at some
Something
point
can
that I'm going
happen,
to
right?
regret. And I don't ever want to be put in
Right.
that kind of situation. And
I tell you, I appreciate that story because one of the things I try to battle, I try to bust myths, and one of the myths that society has, and we certainly have it here in track and field as well, is that, today is so much worse. The kids are worse. The kids don't love the sport as much, yada, 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 yada. And yet here you're telling a story that happened back in we're still in the 80s, right? We're probably late 80s.
this was 1995.
Okay, so this is the mid 90s. So that's when I graduated in
Yeah.
94. So this is when I was a high schooler. You just told a story that if you would have told it without any context of time, someone would have said, "Oh, yeah, this is probably in the last year or two. I've seen that on social. Kids
Yeah.
are getting up in teachers' faces." It's like, no, this actually happened almost 30 years ago.
Sure.
More than 30 years ago. Yeah, wow. I'm old. Wow.
Yeah, we're
So
old.
I don't think, yeah, thanks. I don't I don't think that things are worse today. I think we have more visibility on them today. And I
Sure.
certainly don't like, I saw this the other day. This is so cringe to me. I saw this on Twitter, of course. Um, it was a coach bashing athletes, and I actually think it was another sport that came out. I think it may have been a football coach or something. So I'll give our track coaches a reprieve on this. But the kids today, they're softer. They don't they want to skip practices all the time. They don't want to really dive into their sport. And I'm like, I remember in high school, I tried to skip practices. I was a teenager. I was a kid.
Or
Come
I was a
on.
teenager.
I just don't think, I don't think things are different. I don't think kids nor adults are different. I think technologies might be different and therefore we see.
Technology is different. And
Yeah.
I see, and this is something that because I mean, I've been coaching 31 years
Mhm.
now, is that I am just further away from where, when I first got into coaching, what was I, 22, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And, you're not that far away from 18, 19, you kind of remember, and
Right.
you kind of,
Good point.
obviously as you mature and in your adulthood, your life changes, you do things differently.
Mhm.
You're just further away from where those kids are.
Mhm.
Is it different? Yes, it is,
Mhm.
but change is inevitable, and
Yeah.
you've got to learn, it's adapt or die.
Yeah.
And, we might not like where young kids, I'm trying to do my air quotes,
Yeah.
young
Yeah.
kids are today. But it's where they are. And we need to, as people in the profession, we need to do the things that we can
Yeah.
to still help mold them into the people that we need for a
Yeah.
productive society. We just got to do it in a different way.
Yeah. And that's a great point when I'm thinking about like recruits looking for their college coaches. Some kids need a 25 to 30-year-old because of where that 25 to 30-year-old is. And so, because I don't ever want to say like, well, yeah, how does like my instinct was to say, yeah, how does a 60-year-old coach relate to an 18-year-old kid? They don't relate to them the same way they were when they were 30.
Exactly.
They're 60. They're in their life is different.
Mhm.
And some kids need that. Some kids need that a 60-year-old's perspective as their college coach. I mean, obviously, you think about some of the coaches of age that are, they're doing awesome. They're kicking butt and doing amazing things.
Yeah.
Well, that must mean they're finding the kids that's what I need. I need more fatherly or even grandfatherly type experience. And some kids need, hey, I need a big bro or a young dad more type experience, or young mom. This isn't just
Sure.
male here on this for that aspect. But that's just interesting. The way you said that is maybe kind of think about that. It's like, oh man, kids also need coaches in different age ranges for their style.
Sure.
That's got to be so hard. Like, I don't even know if a kid even thinks about that. Like I'd love to look at like, I know they get more than 5 visits, but if you took kids, their top 5 visits, the ages of primarily the coaches that are going to work with them, not necessarily
Mhm.
the head coaches, like, are they all in the same range? Because they've identified that, or are they
Yeah.
not? And they're not even thinking about, they're just thinking about the bling and the swag and the
Mhm.
accolades and whatever. I don't know. I've never really thought
No,
about that.
it does, and it's a huge part, and it's one of the things that we've changed in the recruiting game. Early on in my career, that's what I was really good at. I was the phone warrior. I was in the office till 9:30, 10 o'clock every
Mhm.
night, making phone calls, calling kids and talking, and that's just not how it's done anymore. And
Mhm.
and it's and it's this is not this is one of those where, if this comes across as a criticism, it's not. Just kids are different now.
Mhm.
Most kids are not great verbal communicators on the phone. They talk with their thumbs.
Okay, so we're skipping ahead a little bit, but this is an important
Okay.
discussion. So no, but this is important. So let's go ahead and go here, and we'll pop back to the high school and then Sam Houston and
Yeah.
Woodgard and all that. You're saying that they're not great communicators.
I
Can
said
you?
verbal.
Okay.
But
Okay, no. I'm stay here,
okay.
stay with me. So you're
Yeah.
because you're right. Correct me. I want to
Mhm.
make sure I'm not misconstrued. You're saying
Okay.
that today, and big generalizations here, of course, not
Yes,
every
yes.
kid, that
Broad brush.
they're not great verbal communicators. Now, I want you to think real hard about when you were that phone warrior,
Mm-hmm.
and so your Collins, they're verbal. Were they really good verbal communicators back then, or is it just
Well,
convenient to say
but
or is it convenient to say they're more preferable to be text or DM'd
yeah,
today?
well, yeah, I guess kind of let me expand on that. Is
Please,
that
please, please.
back when I first started, that was our main form of communication. We
That's
called on
correct.
the
Yep,
telephone and we talked on the phone.
that's right.
There was no digital print communication other than writing a letter, looking a stamp, and
Right.
mailing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, which we did back then as well.
Yeah,
A lot of. I mean,
yeah.
you and I can commiserate
Oh
about
my
that.
gosh. Yeah.
The questionnaires and letters you mailed out.
Yeah.
Um, so it was natural. You called on the phone, you talked to people, and that's what people did. I can remember even in my social life.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm tracking. Okay.
And so now I find it more difficult to have extended early on phone calls with kids. Once you get them in person, it's usually a different story.
Sure.
And this is nothing scientific, but in my recruiting, I tend to ask a lot of open-ended questions, and I get one-word responses.
Yeah.
You know, And so
When you tell that example right there, are you thinking in the last 4 years or the last, I'm gonna say 14 years? Here's
on the spectrum, I see it
let me
being a
explain.
little.
Let me explain why I asked that, because
Sure.
the last 4 years, these kids, think about the last 4. If you're recruiting a kid this year, their last 4 years, their freshman year roughly was COVID.
Yes.
And I have a 13 and 10-year-old, so I had a 9 and 6-year-old ish going through the remote learning, and we flubbed it all. And I say we flubbed. There's no finger wagging at administrators and teachers. We had no clue what the heck to do. So I mean,
We were
yeah.
stumbling through all.
So, but I guess it's a real thing that these kids, because of being at home, not being in classrooms, not being around their kids, their social skills and therefore their communication skills are really tamped down, I guess.
Yes.
That's why I asked, are you seeing this in the last 4 years? Which is like, well,
It has begun
there's an issue.
progressing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been progressing, but really it's an issue now.
yeah.
And then how, because now my initial communication with athletes is by text message.
Is that
Or
right?
DM or something like that. That's my initial.
That's your initial now, which it used to be either the
You would
questionnaire or
cold
the
call.
phone.
Hey,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
Coach
yeah,
Self,
yeah.
You set up a text message, or you text them to kind of set up a phone call, because I think sometimes they need to prepare a little bit. Plus, their lives are crazy, insanely busy. So I just try, and instead of just calling you out of the clear blue, hey, maybe you can't answer this text right now, but you can text me back and we can set up a phone call. And it tends to be a little more difficult. Let's just put it that way. So
do you have
some kids are great. It's not all kids. Some kids are great.
have you recruited kids where I'm gonna say the majority, or let's just say a big portion of the communication was only through text? It was less phone and more.
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of times kids won't answer the phone, and it's for whatever reason. I can't tell you how many phones I call now and they don't answer, and there is no voicemail set up.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I've had another coach say that before, and I have to step up for my athletes here,
Okay.
because I call a lot of coaches as well, and I am floored because now we're talking about adults who
Okay.
either don't have their voicemail set up, or it says this mailbox is full.
It's full.
I mean, I literally, because first of all, it does much like the face you were making. It's like, what in the world? Same thing. I'm like, what in the world? You're an adult. Like, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
then I immediately go to, dude, don't recruits call you? You are missing out on, and maybe it's like no one leaves voicemails anyway, Mike. So what? What's
Yeah.
the matter? But still, I'm like, what in the world? Like how?
Yeah.
So that's not a kid thing necessarily.
Oh, no.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's a technology, like we have gotten, like voicemail used to be like the coolest thing in the world, from the old
Oh, yeah, you got a voice
machines
stuff.
to voicemail to visual voicemail. And
Yeah.
now it's like, nah, bro, you better just text me or something.
That was your dopamine hit back then. You
Yeah,
got
right.
voicemail.
Yeah, it's huge. Now it does boggle me, and it boggles me more with adults than kids, to be honest
And
with
I
you,
would
when I
say,
coach. But
again, just broad brush painting. It's
yeah.
kind of a cultural thing.
Hmm.
The amount of people that call my desk phone and do not leave a voicemail.
Hmm.
I mean, they'll call 6 times in a day, and there's no voicemail left. And I kind of have it a priority. It's like, if it's not important enough for you to leave a voicemail, it's not important enough for me to call you back.
No, okay, that makes me feel better because I do the same thing. Because so first of all, I don't leave text voicemails either. Very rarely.
Yeah.
But if it's I feel like I'm calling like 99% cell phones. Those I don't feel like I call very many landlines. So
yeah, not too many.
So I will text and just be like, hey, call me back. And if I don't, I fully don't expect a return. Like, oh, I was just checking in. Like, they can get back when they're. And then I treat it the same way. If Dave, if you call me and don't leave me a voicemail or text me, I'm like, oh well, he must have butt dialed, or
exactly.
he'll email me like he didn't want anything. And I'm in business. Like, man, David calls, I should probably answer because he's probably trying to buy something. And I'm still like, nah, he probably didn't want anything. Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah.
Or he's just calling to shoot the bull.
Which is cool, but it's like, all right, well, you didn't leave a voicemail to call you back to shoot the bull, so we're good. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will come back up. Let's pop back. So you teach, you're coaching in high school, teaching long-term sub, and my wife's a long-term sub too, as well. So I'm starting to understand teaching a lot more than what I did in the past. That's for sure. So I appreciate that your openness and authenticity with that story, because I think that's important for people to hear that that's not a 2024 thing. It didn't
No, I
begin
was,
this year. This
yeah.
began a long time. It began before this story here,
Mhm.
back in 95, 94 as well. So you start getting the realizations like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure high school's for me. So you go back to Sam Houston
Mhm.
and you're volunteering coaching, which turns into a little bit of a paid position. Are
Mhm.
you at this point, are you like, I'm a track coach, or is there still like, I don't know, I may teach, like where are you at? And you're like,
Well, yeah, no, I
professional.
was fully vested. Okay, this was, my son was 18 months, 2 years,
Mhm,
roughly, somewhat,
mhm,
let's call it in there. And it was like, okay, I am doing this to get, I'm trying to move back towards being a track coach. This is what I want to do. This is my calling. And, there's a couple other things. I was I was in the personal health industry in Houston for a while when I
mhm,
first moved back to Houston, and did that for a while, working in the Houston area as a personal trainer, nutritional, stuff like that.
mhm,
And knew that, okay, the track thing is what I want to do. That's where it's where I want to be. So I was at here at Sam to finish my graduate work and get that stuff going, and I was all in at that point.
I think I misstated that. After the high school stint, did you go back to Lamar or to Sam Houston?
I went back to Sam Houston.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Or
I
I
think,
went to Sam Houston.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So
think,
basically, I was in grad school at Lamar. I
yeah,
was married. My wife got pregnant at the time.
right,
It was decided that probably the best thing is move back to Houston area.
right.
I didn't have a fully established career. She was still working on her undergraduate at the time.
Mhm,
It was just decided that we probably need to get closer to home, back to her parents' things. So moved back home, worked in the one of Houston's three downtowns over in the Galleria area of Houston, and
mhm.
did that, and and then got the long-term sub job. So it was about 18 months or so
Got it.
of me being out of college coaching, and I was like, okay, I need to get back into this and
So,
start.
so you go to Sammy. This is your first time at Sammy.
This
That's
is
where
my
I think,
first
yeah,
time
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think either you or I said go back and, and I just know you have Sam
yeah,
Houston. So, okay, all right. So you go to Sam Houston, volunteer coach, and then that turns into a little bit of a paid position.
yes.
Okay. How was that experience? Because now you are track coach. Like before, it was like, it felt like there could be, you could go into corporate health, you could go into
Mhm.
teaching, like there was still, but now it's
Yeah,
like, okay, I found the focus. We're going to go down
yes.
this line for a profession. How was that experience coaching? And what role did other coaches, whether it was coaches at Sam Houston or friends and mentors you've met along the way, maybe even Coach Carter, what are you doing? For mentorship, whether it's formal or informal.
Okay. Well, John Lumley was the head coach then. He was one of the coaches that taught me about just, he loved coaching and he was serious about it, but he was the one that first, I didn't take the lesson to heart back then, but he was the one that taught me about balance. Is that it's not coaching 24/7. You've got a wife and kids and things like that are the priority in your life. You know, as track coaches, especially at the collegiate level, we don't always necessarily do that. We think and for somewhat, yes, your career world revolves around track, but at the same time, your actual world revolves around your family, and those need to be the priority. He taught me that. I didn't take that lesson to heart. I
Mhm,
learned a hard lesson a few years later. We've talked about that before.
mhm,
So he was very good in that respect. But then I also worked with Don Hood, who is now at
mm,
Harding University, and a
yeah,
dear friend of mine, a guy that I learned a lot from. I learned about the importance of faith in your life and how it can kind of carry through, the importance of really taking these kids to heart and loving on them, and what it means
mhm,
to love on a kid. And it's not
mhm,
all the touchy feely,
mhm,
sometimes
mhm,
loving is hard stuff,
mhm,
and he was pretty good at that. But he was also, uh, even at the times that he was just bearing down on kids or even me when I screwed something up, you could see there was a concern and love that he was trying to correct something that he thought was wrong to help make me a better coach, to help make that kid a better person. And I learned that quite a bit. Again, I learned that. I didn't necessarily take it completely to heart early in my coaching career. I was still young, and you know how we are as young coaches. We're going to go set the world on fire and, we're just doing what we want to do. But especially as I look back on it now, I learned a lot of great things about how to deal with kids, how I deal with discipline, how I do things on the team. And so those were great people to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
People to
people.
learn from.
No doubt. Absolutely. So why go from Sam Houston to Garden City?
Needed a job. A buddy of mine named Dion Lampy, we were the same age. He had come through, he went to Stephen F. Austin. He had GA'd here at Sam Houston. And then I'm pretty sure, yeah, he was back as the full-time assistant at Stephen F. Austin. And then his family is from the Western Kansas area. He was actually visiting family in Dodge City, found out that the job at Garden City was open, literally went to Walmart and bought like a cheap jacket and tie and walked into the AD's office with, hey, I'm your next track coach. Here's why I can do it. I can do it. These are the things I can do. And they hired him. And so he spent a year there and then had a position created for an assistant and called me and said, he called back to Sam Houston knowing one of the GAs there would be a good fit for him. John and Don both said, Dave's your guy. And so, and the rest is history. So before I was actually there, we're at the state meet recruiting for Garden City Community College.
So this is where you and I start intersecting is in the Kansas Jayhawk conference. And, I was only there for a year at Neosho County, and I still tell people like how instrumental that year was in not only my career, but me personally, being in the JUCO system, being with I'm sure there's 25-year-old coaches right now that are in the Mountain West or the Sun Belt or the Rocky Mountain that are like, oh man, the group that we have and they're right. The people in other schools, the people you interact with, you become friends with and compete against, they will become lifelong friends.
Yes.
That time that I was there for the 2001 season. So that one season I was there, I just look at the coaches, you, Matt, Lance, I'm missing people, Keith,
Yeah.
It was special and really stinking tough. I mean, I know people like Redrick and guys are making the Kansas Jayhawk back to being super stupid tough, but it was, and I know, this feels like the old man of like, well, in my day though, it was, if you didn't jump 55 feet, you didn't make the triple jump finals, all that kind of stuff, which probably ain't that far from the truth, but
it's not that far. No.
Talk to us about, because it affected my life, and I was there just for a year. It affected my life in the sense of like, I still to this day will say one of my favorite track meets to go to is the JUCO National Championship, because it just kind of resonates with my life. I think for one, for the coaches, as you're a high school coach, super tough coaching and helping to get your kids recruited to the next level. That's tough. It's super tough. On the college level, coaching and then trying to recruit kids to your program. That's super tough. JUCO coaches have to do both of those. They got to coach and recruit kids to their school and help their kids go to other schools. So tough. And you're talking about kids that are, these are second chance, third chance kids. These are kids that, betting on themselves, weren't, didn't have the marks out of school, out of high school to go to the college they thought they wanted to go to. So they bet on themselves. I just love that, man. I really do. I love the second, third, fourth chance kid because I needed second, third, and fourth chances. So I love that time. Talk to us about JUCO. It's different than anything you'd been involved with up to that point, including high school and things like that.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what that time at Garden City, and you eventually go from the assistant to the head coach as well there. Talk to us about that time, that transition.
Oh, I look back. It is my time at Garden City was so instrumental in kind of laying some foundational work as to how to do things. Because the one thing I can tell you, and if you're a successful JUCO coach, and there's some of the coaches that are still there in the Jayhawk, Harriet Cloud and Pat,
that's right.
At Hutch, and that if you're a successful JUCO coach, you work and you work long, hard hours. And so in my practices today, if I see someone that's come through a JUCO program or has 3 or 4 years and done well, I know that person understands, I hate to use terms, the grind,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean, it is a nonstop,
Good point.
and I learned how to work, and I learned how to work, and I had to perfect my recruiting game, to be
Yeah.
honest. Because and once again, the majority of our kids came from Texas, a large portion of them. I won't say
Yeah.
majority.
Right.
We had quite a few out-of-state kids because there was no, at that time, South Plains was a distance-only program back then.
Right.
And so we had quite a few Texas kids, and it was much more definitive line of whether you're going to go to D1 or not back then. So
I can't tell if it's my headphones or something. Your mic's kind of really low right now.
oh, I'm sorry. So maybe I'm just far away. Is that any better there?
Oh, there you go. Did you do something or did I do something?
I turned, well, how my system is in my office is I have a sound bar underneath my monitor here.
Okay.
But it's also tied in. You can't see it because it's blurry. There's a TV behind me with a sound bar, which most of the time that's what it comes through.
Okay.
So
All right.
I'll just try and stay a little closer. And
no, you sound great now. It was
okay.
almost like I thought maybe my headphones had disconnected or something. It was like very low muted. It wasn't farness type of thing.
Okay.
So you were saying, I did hear a little bit audible of, at that time, there were no junior colleges in Texas. So obviously, Texas was much to be poached by other junior colleges.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As Lance and I at Barton, that's where we lived, getting our kids. And I had a pretty good connection from my, I did a year at Lamar recruiting. I did almost 2 years at Sam Houston recruiting and getting to know some high school coaches. And then, I ended up kind of being attached to a couple back then. It was you had the feeder system. You kind of worked with a school. I was working with University of Arkansas fairly closely back then. And, as they ran across kids that didn't make it, they would send them our way. So, and it's just how business was done back then. So, so just, I really got good at recruiting then, because, and let me just, Garden City, Kansas is so much different than anywhere else in Texas. And it's just, it's not a derogatory statement at all. It's a different part of the world. It just really is. It's, I grew up in, Pasadena, Texas, and in the Conroe, Montgomery County area with, 100-foot tall pine trees and woods and those kind of things. And you get to Western Kansas and the only trees were ones that people planted, and there was, nonstop wheat and corn as far as you can see. So, it was just different, they had a real winter. I learned what snow was. Holy cow. I learned I never want to live in it again, but so, but I had to get good at recruiting and I had to do a lot of it very fast because a lot of it, in JUCO back then, kids found out, oh, you're not going to make it in May, June, July, August.
Right.
And so, you were just, it was just a whirlwind of recruiting and getting stuff done and, and training. And, my first year at Garden, I got hired at Garden in August, and that December, the guy that hired me, Dion Lampy, took the head coaching job back at Stephen F. Austin.
Right.
And so I was there with a full men's and women's team by myself, had been there 3.5 months, got a wife and a 3.5-year-old baby, and they didn't hire me an assistant that first year. So I got a baptism of fire about coaching and how to get it done.
It's really unfair. I mean, like, not even like, that could be construed as unfair. That's 100% unfair. Not only to you, it's unfair to those kids.
Sure.
You're real early in your career here, and your first, I'm going to call it your first big boy job, your first real job.
It was my first where all of us
with a kid, with a wife. Were there any regret? I mean, you're out of your element. Like I said, there's a winter and there's a real winter in Kansas, and there's a real windy winter in Western Kansas.
Yeah.
Were there any like regrets of like, oh man, we either should have stayed in Texas, or man, I should have took that teaching job? Or was there any, as you look back now, maybe it's easier to see?
Yeah, all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's something that maybe younger coaches need to, from one of the old guys that's been at it is, something I learned from my dad is, I hate to use the term, but it really kind of, you kind of fake it till you make it,
Mhm.
is just keep at it.
Yeah.
There were times I can remember a time we had some kids coming in. I was picking up at the airport. Without getting into the details of it, there was just going to be a disaster when I got these kids back to Garden. Just money and where they're going to stay and where they're going
Mhm.
to do, and because the Jayhawk was different back then. You could only give partials, and
Right.
and these were international kids. And I can remember calling my wife on the phone, waiting at the Wichita airport, telling her I can't do this. I don't know what I'm going to do,
Mhm.
and she was like, "Yeah, you can. Just
Mhm.
you're going to deal with it. Stay with it. You can get this figured out. But the deal is if you walk away, if you don't deal with it, it's just going to get worse.
Mhm.
So and I just keep plugging away.
Mhm.
Even the most terrible situations that you think in the moment, I'm like, I got these 4 kids from Jamaica showing up in January in Wichita. They're freezing cold. We're fixing to drive back to Garden City, 4.5 hours. They don't really have a way to pay for school. They don't have long story short, I wasn't necessarily responsible for that recruiting, but those things were already put into motion.
Yeah.
And when I got the head job, it became my problem.
Yeah, that's right.
I had to solve it, is you'll get it figured out. You'll be able to figure it out, and just you got to keep plugging away. And I'm a firm believer, and you learn so much more from the stuff you screw up than the stuff you get right.
Hmm.
And make a mistake or two. It's going to be okay, and learn to correct that mistake, and it'll make you a better coach.
When I got there in 2000, and I'm sure, first of all, you said something I wanted to check real quick. You said things were different back then. We could only give partial scholarships. I remember this. We could only
Mhm.
do tuition and books fees. They had to do their own room and board, which usually through Pell Grant and things like that. Is that different now? Are they allowed to do full rides? And
Jayhawks can get full rides now. Yeah,
dude, could you
yeah.
imagine? Oh my
I
God.
know. I,
Oh
I
my
can't
God.
believe it. And
Oh
it's
my God.
still, yeah, I couldn't
These
imagine not having to worry about that.
these 2024 Kansas Jayhawk JUCO, they weren't as tough as us. We had to do
Ah,
partials,
that's
man.
right. I mean,
Phil.
I can remember calling a kid. Here's a blast from the past, and God bless Darvis Patton. I hope that was my first really big recruit that I signed. Darvis Patton. I mean, he ended up being pretty good. He was he literally came to Garden City Community College for 6 hours of out-of-state tuition and books. That was his scholarship.
Dude.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was his scholarship.
These guys like Redrick,
That's all any of us had.
they talk a big game. Now I'm like, dude, you get it so much easier. I tell you, Philip, it's less of what I think now. I'm just kidding.
I know you are.
Um, okay, so where I was going before I asked that, thanks for that clarification. I had no clue they changed that. When I got there, 2000, so I was there for the 2001 season. Quick landscape. And by the way, to your point about younger coaches and where you are today, I was fresh out of college, a student assistant at Troy, so I'd taken a couple years off, so maybe I was 22, maybe. So I'm young, head coach.
Sure.
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why they hired me. What a mistake they made. But I take a big bad ego look of the conference, and I go, oh, I see what's happening here. Uh, Everybody is allowing Barton to win. There's a few programs that are trying, and everybody else has given up. You were one of the teams that was at least trying. I mean,
I was trying.
because you guys were good. You guys were
Yeah.
good. Barton was just destroying people.
Yes.
A very good coach. I mean, they were doing a great job.
Sure.
Um, why were you guys as successful as you were? Because the majority, including Neosho before I got there, by the way, and we didn't do anything. I was only there for a year. The next year would have been amazing, but then I left. But a lot of us Neoshos were scoring 6 points at conference and therefore maybe 1 point at nationals or something like that.
Mhm.
Barton is winning it by 100 points at conference and winning nationals by 100 points, but Garden City and a Hutch and, a Butler, when Matt was there, maybe a Butler would pop in there and they'd be, 3, 4, 5 at nationals and probably second, third, at the conference meet. what was it about you guys? Because you're coming in brand new, you don't know the JUCO, so you're learning everything on the fly here.
Yeah.
What made you in Garden City successful? Because everyone, you're right. When you paint this, people might think like, oh, he's being a little exaggeratory about Garden City, Kansas. Oh no, it's pretty much all of these, except for Johnson County, all of these, Neosho County, Allen counties,
Sure.
Barton, Great Bend. It is not paradise, people. All of these places are just like, you think college towns are small, shrink it
Oh,
by 1/1000th, and now you've got Garden City, Great Bend, Chanute, etc. What made you successful there? That's a big question. What are
it
some
was,
things that made you successful?
yeah. It was um, I was blessed / lucky to have an athletic director that wanted us to be good.
Mm,
He didn't quite understand track and kind of how it worked, but he trusted me and trusted my vision of how we could do things. Um, so I was fairly well resourced for a JUCO for a Jayhawk conference team back then. I had a fair amount of out of state scholarship that I could give out. And for those that don't know the difference, there's a different pool in Kansas if you're in state. Yeah, pretty much if you're in Kansas, and this is why it was back then. I don't know how it is today. But if you wanted to get your associate's degree, you could just about get most of your academic school paid for by some type of scholarship somewhere.
Yeah.
But we were blessed in that we had a pretty good facility that was a track only facility. It was fairly well maintained. For what some other people had. Some schools didn't have a track at all.
Yeah.
They were going to the high school and things like that. But it was just, kind of probably one of the things my dad instilled in me is just, I work hard and I hustled and I knew I needed this and I wanted to be good. And I knew the responsibility of being good laid on me as the head coach. And so, I hired people that were like me and wanted to work hard and wanted to recruit hard and do things. And, it's kind of funny. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah. Somebody said that pretty famously. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you, we had Tabari Henry on here recently.
Okay.
Tabari, Barton County athlete, went on to Texas A&M and now, has coached junior college, won national championships in junior college, an amazing human being. And he introduced me, and this is crazy. I coached for 10 years at a fairly high level, Kansas Jayhawk, the SEC of NJCAA, and then I coached in the SEC. I had, and all I do is talk to track coaches all day. I had never heard this term he introduced me to. He said he gets labeled, people call him a passport coach because, quote unquote, every athlete he has is from overseas, international. That's not true, but okay. But I never heard that. And first of all, is abhor the right word? I hate that any other coach would call another coach that. First of all, let's just start there.
Sure.
Because it's within the rules. So until the rule changes,
exactly.
Shut up. The whole world's for all of us.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is, and again, this is kind of those things I feel like I see on, here's the curse word of the podcast. I see on the Let's Run message board where people are like, oh, there's so many more international students in NCAA and therefore NJCAA today than there was, in the past. And I'm like, I don't, maybe I'm out of it. So maybe I don't really, sorry, I don't look at the list and start counting who's from what country. I don't care. But I remember a high level of international recruiting. So this is 2000. How did you learn it? Because I remember I didn't do any international recruiting, pretty much didn't do any international recruiting when I was at Troy, but then I got to JUCO and, you got coaches from Jamaica Colony and things like that. You got to learn all these things. How did you learn it? And I don't want to put words in your mouth and say embrace it, but you did do a good job with outside the borders recruiting. Talk to us about how did you learn it? How did you, again, this might be my word, put it in your mouth, embrace it. How did you, that process?
I was lucky enough in that some of the coaches that were recruiting out of my program would refer kids to me. And that's really how it worked back then. It was the referral system. And it's much the same today. And this is going to sound worse than it really is most of the legitimate international kids have some type of handler in their home country. Okay, that someone that's helping guide them through the process. I got introduced to a couple of handlers, and that's really kind of how it worked. And understand back then there was no internet.
Right, that's right.
There was no internet, so everything was still done, overnight mail express and phone calls and fax machines. That's how you did things. And again, I had to learn from some mistakes. We brought in a girl from Tanzania. I can't even remember her name anymore, not on purpose, but she was a nice kid. She was a sweet kid, but she was not an athlete. And this was kind of I don't want to say it was a scam, but it was definitely hey, we've got these certificates of performance on this girl, and we're going to send this girl with the exact same name and just try and get her to the United States. And that's exactly what happened, because after about 2 months there of me absolutely thinking I killed this poor girl, she was like, coach, I've never run before, ever. But she had a visa. She was in the US legally. And, she left school after that. And I don't know, she went to an African community in the Atlanta area, I believe. And so I learned a hard lesson then, that you have to trust the people that you're dealing with. And
you would think with the internet and communication, like, I can call Tanzania right now if I wanted, right? That would be that type of situation would go to zero. Does that still happen today, or is that right?
Yeah, you have to know. It's not quite, it's harder to get it done. But you have to be very careful, dealing internet. I think that's why you've seen the international recruiting services take off so well, because they are vetting these kids for you.
That makes sense, because I wondered if they were kind of like these high school recruiting sites that I don't see a value in yet, and maybe it's just because I don't have a kid that's in the age to get recruited, I guess. But from my experience, it's like I have a good friend. He's kind of like my brother. I'm godfather to his son and daughters and stuff, and he's a pretty good hockey player, and I know nothing about hockey, but he was like, yeah, we were thinking about, he's starting to talk about recruiting, and, we got hit up by, some of these recruiting services. What do you think? And I was like, bro, maybe it's different hockey. I don't know. I go, but in track, like, if you have a school that you're interested in, just email the coach or call the coach, start there. I was like, the coach is going to tell you yay or nay pretty quick. Like, hey, you just don't meet our standards. Like, or, I guess with hockey, maybe you need film or something, but I was like, to have someone else do that. Like, first of all, as a college coach, I have much more, I don't want to say respect necessarily, but I feel better about the kid that calls me versus I get this profile sheet. It's like, oh, you hustled. You had some interest in me.
Sent to every coach,
either
in the country or in your geographical region.
Yeah.
A kid, they need to pick 10 schools out. They need to attach their mile split or their athletic.net account to it, have a transcript attached. And then, most schools, like we do, we have our recruiting standards online somewhere. Do you fit what the school's looking for? Yes. Okay. And, move forward from there.
So to tie that off, I get these now. I'm starting to understand these international recruiting services. That makes a lot more sense of like, hey, I need some help verifying things. So yeah.
Well, and I do a couple of things. They vet them, and they also help with the paperwork. So they are setting up appointments at the consulate to get visas, to get transcripts evaluated, all those kind of things. That
makes sense.
That's where they're coming in, and that's an invaluable service.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I hate, by the way, I know if you're listening, you probably feel like you're talking about real people, and we're kind of dismissing them as numbers and what can they do for me only. So I apologize for that. The truth of the matter is that we are an attract team, and we're trying to recruit kids at certain marks, depending on what levels that we need and stuff. So I don't ever want to have people think that I'm just dismissing people down, that, it's a real Susie and Jack and Lisa and Tom person. I get that. But they're applying for a job essentially by their marks. And so we need, you can't be lying. That's just like lying on your resume. So, so apologize if you feel like we're, dismissing, belittling people here. So I get these recruiting services. Okay. Something else that you said. See, I told you before we hit record, David, that, we're certainly going to go through your career, but there's going to be certain topics that come up that like we're just going to run with. And so you keep bringing up great topics. So first of all, you make a really good point. So the knock on these, and I hate this term, and now I'm using it like 1,000 times a day, these passport coaches, they get, it's derogatory because it's like, oh, because you hear this, right? Here's what they say. If you're a passport coach, uh, I'm sorry, if you recruit international kids, you're just buying a team. You're not really coaching, etc. First of all, bull, they still got to get better on your team.
Yeah.
Name a kid that's been really good that's international that didn't get better at the program they went to.
Sure.
It just doesn't. I mean, certainly it happened because not everybody gets better, but they're
Yeah.
getting better. They're still getting coached. Get off of that statement. Second of all, you're taking a risk. It's much harder to verify an
Absolutely.
international versus a kid from Kansas, Florida, Texas, whatever. So um, that's amazing. Well, that's good about that service. You brought up another point that I really wanted to get onto, and I didn't write a note down, and so I
Okay.
forgot. So I'm sure it'll come back up. Okay, where are we? Sam Houston. We're at Garden City. All
We're at
right, so
Garden
we're
City.
Garden City. How did you? So you quickly transitioned from, you thought you were going there as an assistant coach, and then you quickly transitioned to the
Yes.
head coach. How was that? That had to be a little bit of what do they call it? Baptism by fire. You just
Absolutely.
right in it. How did you figure that part out? Were there anybody on your speed dial that you called to ask for help? How did you do that?
No, not really, just because I'm hard-headed and, I'm one of those, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do the, just good or bad things my dad instilled in me, you just keep plugging away and you get it figured out. I learned a lot. I screwed up a lot. I screwed up a bunch of stuff, but I had to have a crash course in money management and budget management and team
Yeah.
management and, all the things that are outside of we're writing training planning and going to have practice and you still have those things that
Right.
you need to be good at, but there's and back then I think it's a little different now, but I know back then most of the junior college kids, there was something that they needed work on. We're going to put it that way. There was either a financial aspect, an academic aspect, a social aspect, behavioral, whatever the case was.
Right.
Like you said, some of these are second, third chance kids. You needed to figure that out. So, my first year, I didn't figure it out very well. I had a lot of problems. And but luckily,
So what did you do to close the gap on those issues then? Was it, whether it was I read these books to help me with the how to deal with emotionally traumatized 18-year-olds, or was it our baseball coach there who'd been doing it for 30 years, I sat down with him, and so because there's a lot of people right now that heard that and say, yeah, I'm in that boat. I'm in that boat right now. So
okay.
how did you help overcome that?
It was, a lot of it was just, back then, not that I'm against self-help stuff, but I don't really know that there was a lot of references for. It's funny because you mentioned that my wife is a teacher, and our best friends from church, the lady is she's a psychologist, and so she's kind of been helping my wife kind of understand where some of this trauma comes from, and where these things are. And, a lot of this stuff is not these kids' fault. Well, most of it is not these kids' fault.
Right.
You're just seeing the reaction to some really, really horrible things that have happened in these young people's lives.
Right.
My AD was an old school guy, just kick them off the team. And I'm not a save them at all costs, but I lean towards that end of, no, let's figure out where we can go. How can we get this kid around? And, I've learned that you attract many more flies with sugar than vinegar. That's kind of how I deal things. Kind of, not that there's no discipline, or there's not that there's no repercussions for bad actions, but at the same time, I'm not remiss to just discard a kid and kick them off and send them on their way. Sometimes that's all you can do. All right, you get to a point, but and I've learned that through the years that if you, not that you just give them innumerable chances, but if you just keep working with a kid and you show them love and you're trying to help them, sometimes they figure it out. Unfortunately, a lot of times they don't, but I had to learn that the ones that don't figure it out, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You've done your part. They've come into your life. You've tried to be a positive aspect on their life for the time that you're allotted. And if you can extend that time and make better things happen for them, great. If not, what can you do? But eventually I started seeing more and more kids that were buying in and doing the things right. And we were helping moving them on. And, there's kids that I still, and it's the reason that I coach in the college level is I absolutely love watching 18, 19-year-old kids, let's be honest, even though the law sees them as adults, they're kids, turn into 22, 23-year-old young adults in there. I have a bulletin board at home that all it has is marriage announcements, graduation, childbirth announcements, pictures of me at graduations with kids. And that's why I do what I do, is being able to be an influence on those kids and impart, the life of Dave Self and some of my belief system, which, good or bad, depending on your viewpoint, and impart that on them and seeing them grow up to be productive members of society. So,
you talked about honey and vinegar. I think discipline is honey and lack of discipline is vinegar, actually. And,
sure.
because the way you said it is how a lot of people would say, it's like, oh, yeah, I feel honey better than vinegar, but there's discipline, like as if that's vinegar. I think, my experience with kids is they'll never say this because they're kids, but they crave structure. They crave discipline. And sometimes I think, to your point, when you get a kid and it doesn't work out, I don't think that that's wrong, that you did anything wrong, or maybe they were doing some things wrong, but it just, you weren't the right person at the right time.
Exactly.
And that's not against you. That's just, a happenstance
of
against the kid life. And,
exactly.
And we don't know that. What you don't ever see in those instances where you just have to release a kid, you've done the right thing. You've shown them love, you've given them grace, you've given them guidelines, things like that, and it doesn't work out. What you never get to see, and it happens, is 20 years later when they do hopefully get their lives straight and they look back and go, oh, you know what I needed? I look back and like, man, Coach Self, I treated him like crap. He tried to love on me and tried to get me into classroom. And I was just a 19-year-old punk and was just like, F off, I ain't doing it. I can't do it for whatever. And now, boy, I wish I would have. My life would have, I'd accelerated where I am today if I'd have listened back then. You don't ever get to see that, because rarely do we tie that back and call you up and say, hey, you remember me? And you're like, yeah, I do, jerk. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not a jerk anymore. And the part of it is because of you, David. Yeah. You just don't ever see that. So, okay. So how long were you at Garden?
I was there through 2002.
So how many years?
Almost 7.
7. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. By the time I got there and did things. So yeah.
And let me take a stab. The Broncos, if I remember correctly.
Bronc Busters.
Man, I'm so close on these.
You're close, man.
I'm so close. Why do you leave and where do you go?
I got fired. I got fired.
Wait a minute. So, David, there's you get to tell the story how you want. You could have said that in a, I decided to leave because so you got fired. What in the world? What happened?
Our AD was in the process of retiring. We hired an assistant AD who was going to be the AD in waiting. He was a basketball coach. He knew nothing about track and field, absolutely nothing. And kind of, I don't want to go into the gory details, but it kind of goes back to our first, the presentation we did, talking about mistakes you made in your personal life, blah, blah, blah. At this point in time, my personal life was absolutely crashing down around my head. I wasn't the best coach because I wasn't, just leave it at that. Okay.
Because I want to expound on that just a little bit here. You weren't the best coach, because I know this story very intimately. And by the way, he has shared this story much more in detail than what we're going to get into here today. But he wasn't the best coach because that's not defined by how fast your team runs or how far your kids throw, etc. It's a huge combination. I like to, we've heard this analogy of the puzzle, right? And all these different things lead into, the image of David Self. And I've kind of in my head visualized that a little bit differently. So I still think of a puzzle, but I think of some puzzle pieces are bigger than others, right? And faith and family and things like that are bigger than my role in the church softball league, things like that, right? Yeah. Those are smaller pieces of the puzzle. They're part of you, so they're part of your puzzle. So you weren't the best coach at that point because you were allowing other things to be misprioritized and making I don't say making bad decisions, because
No,
there were
no,
certainly
they
other
were bad
things.
decisions. No,
Yeah, and there
no,
were other things happening too. But
sure.
the basic premise I'm getting here is David's whole puzzle was a little bit out of order here.
Yes.
Even though if he'd had coaching going on point, he had been running 3 flat in the 4x4 and all these kind of things, it still would have unraveled because that's not the number one thing. Coaching is not your number one role. Father, husband, son, brother, those are
That's number one.
much more important roles. Your faith, those are much more important roles. And this is the thing that it scares me the most about track coaches is if I were to say, list your top 10 roles in life, brother, sister, father, mother, coach, et cetera, volunteer, et cetera. I think most of us, if we don't put coach number one, we probably wouldn't because we'd like, oh, no, faith number one, family.
Think about it.
But then our actions would show us that we
Yeah.
put coach number one. Sorry, it really is probably my number one thing with coaches. I think it's sometimes weird when I say, hey, coaching is maybe the third or fourth most important thing you do. And by the way, there's no bigger fan of coaches than I am. So when I say it, it's kind of like, well, what do you mean?
Sure.
Like, hey, I want you to coach until you're 80. If you're going to do that, you got to have your faith, your family, your friends,
Yes,
charity passions,
absolutely.
et cetera, up there.
Yeah.
Sorry for that soliloquy. Please go on. You got fired. That's amazing.
I got fired. Yeah. I was not taking care of my business on the administrative end of being a coach. I was making decisions based around trying to hang on to what was happening at home. And those things I was, and just to clear the air, not on my part anyway, I just worked too much. I worked too much. I was track coach number one.
Yep.
And husband and dad was secondary.
Mhm.
And that was, it's something that I'm still repairing to this day with my 31-year-old son. And I don't mind saying that. But it's a lesson that I learned. And so at any rate, it all came down to, things were going bad at home. My team was having some issues and things were going on. And so we were supposed to go to a track meet at TCU, which is not an easy trip from Garden City, America. It's about a 7-hour bus ride, maybe a little more. So I'd had some little nagging injuries. I'd had some kids, we were kind of midway through the outdoor season. So I decided, you know what? My sprints and hurdles and 800 group, we're going to stay at home and train. We're tired. We don't need to be on the road. We've been on the road a lot. I'm going to go ahead and let my assistant take all the field event kids, do the stuff we need to do at TCU. That'll be fine. Which as a track coach, I can see you nodding your head. You're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to stay home and train my kids. My new AD was just floored that the head coach did not travel with his team. And that was a breach that we just couldn't ever see eye to eye on. And at the end of the year, I was tired and wore out and, just beat up, emotionally drained, and, got done with the national meet, came back, doing my expense reports. My AD calls me in, says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and make a change. And so there I was, without a job. Yeah.
Our sport's weird that is normal, by the way, but can't we see from the other side, like, a baseball team goes to a game and the head coach says, I've got my secondary team. They're a little beat up and we're going to need them in postseason. So I'm going to stay back and we'd be like, well, that's crazy. Just don't do that. Our sport is a little weird like that. I'm not sure our sport is correct in that either, by the way, not this specific situation here. I'm talking about the split squads and things like that. Anyway. Okay. So what does one do as you're midway through your expense report? You stopped doing your expense report, I hope, unless it was reimbursements.
Oh no, I was done. I turned it in.
Yeah, okay. I
turned it in, and that's when the AD kind of came out and said, "Oh, hey, I need to meet with you." So,
yeah, I was gonna say, if I'm fired and you doing the rest of my expense report,
yeah,
unless it's personal credit card, credit card reimbursements. So what do? You're in Kansas. You're away from family. They're all, you're Texas.
Yeah.
What do you do?
No, well, I am at this time. I'm already separated, so it's just me in Kansas now. I went and got a job and I worked in a grain elevator.
Wow. In Kansas.
In Kansas.
Yeah.
I worked at a grain elevator in Gano, Kansas.
That's pretty humbling for a guy who is coaching future Olympians,
Yeah.
coaching NCAA or NJCAA champions. Kids are signing at TCU and a bunch of others, Arkansas, et
Yeah.
cetera. That had to be a little like there had to be some humility there, first of all, to do that,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I did that for a while. Um, this is one of the great things. This is where probably my faith kind of came back in, and it, take it for face value. My faith was strengthened, and that I had one of those moments where whatever your belief system is, take this, a higher power, God, spoke to me
Mm.
and was like, you need to get back to Texas. You need to get back close to your wife and your son, and you need to do it today. And so
Wow.
I called my manager. I was 285 feet in the air at the top of a grain elevator, cleaning a wheat chute, and called him on the walkie-talkie, said, I need to meet you in the office right now. And got in the elevator. If you've ever ridden in a grain elevator, basically you have to ride this little, it's like getting into a locker. That's the elevator that gets you
Wow.
down all the way to the floor, and said, hey, I just want you to know I've got to go to Kansas. I mean, I've got to go back to Texas, and I'm leaving tonight. And he looked at me, he goes, and he started to say, so when are you gonna, and he goes, you're not coming back. And I went, nope. And so, I mean, I still had my Garden City Co-op shirt with my name on it, steel toe boots and jeans, drove home, threw everything in the back of my old pickup truck, filled it full of gas, and drove back to Texas that night, called my brother and said, hey, I'm coming home.
So I always like to point out, one of the things that affected me tremendously through this podcast in the past 5 years was this the couple of interviews that I did. One was with Brooks Johnson, and then because of Brooks, George Williams, because Brooks mentioned something that George Williams is famous, I guess, in our world, is probably the best way to say it, of if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. So Brooks was kind of telling me, his interpretation of George and the philosophy of that. And then I had George actually on, and, he gave me his, the origination of it and everything. And I've really like taken it to heart, because what it really means is no judgment is what it means. And, they tell it a lot in the track context of like, when you're looking at another school, another kid, and you're like, oh man, if that kid was in my program, they'd run so fast. It's like, bro, you have no idea. You have no idea what's going on in that kid's life,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. So here, this makes me think. So I was like pointing these things out. I wish I had like the quote unquote fly on the wall with that supervisor. I imagine that supervisor probably, talking to his wife later on, or to, his manager, and is telling the story of like, oh, these guys, David, he's just not a hard worker. He quit on us today. He's, this guy's going to be a quitter for his whole life because he doesn't know the story. And it's just, to me, it's just an example, if you're listening, of like, you don't know someone else's story. If you're not in that huddle, you don't know the play. Here you're hearing the story from David, and I'm sure, like me, you're like, oh, I get it. You of course you had to leave right then. I mean, that's
Yeah.
you have to. I mean, it's just what. And by the way, you're going back to family, and going back into like, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. And here, the supervisor's probably got a much different aspect of the story because he doesn't know everything that's going on. So I just always like to point out this, be cautious. And when I say by being cautious, meaning stop judgment of others. You don't know
Yeah.
what's going on in their lives. So just when you said that, it was remarkable. It just hit me of
Yeah.
like, oh man, that guy probably thinks, these guys, these college coaches think they're tough. He came to work for us. He couldn't handle it. He had to quit. And it's like, no, you have no idea what was going on in his life.
Yeah.
And it was so good that he quit. I know it sucked for you, supervisor, at that
Yeah.
very minute, but he had to. It was so important. Okay. So you go back home, you go back to Texas.
Back home. With no plan, all I know is I mean, Clarion, as clear as it can be. You have to go home. You got to go now.
Wow.
I mean, if there was ever a moment in my life where I've been sure of something, it was that moment.
Wow.
I mean, pushing a broom. Okay, got to go home.
Wow.
And
Hey, kudos for you for hearing that and for acting on it.
Acting on it. Yeah, absolutely. So went back home, spent about 48 hours with family, just, this is what's going on. Here's where I'm at, and and I know we're getting close on time, so I'll kind of give you the cliff notes of this, but within 24 hours, knew I needed a job. I was always a guy, got to have a job. So I was probably 48 hours after I kind of relaxed and kind of recovered from a 12-hour drive through the night getting home. Walked into a Lowe's, applied for a job, and I drove a forklift for 5 months, unloading trucks at Lowe's.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, spoiler alert, we know you get back into coaching. How?
Yeah.
So how?
Okay. From there, I had a buddy who had been a coach just from connections, got me in with a company called AmeriQuest.
Hmm.
I'm not proud of this, but I probably helped crash the economy back in 03 or so, because I wrote a whole lot of B paper refinance loans that probably, he was like, you can do this. I made money hand over fist. It was ridiculous.
Are you talking like the subprime loans types things?
Oh yeah, I was doing the subprime refinance stuff.
You know what's funny? That's funny, David, because I bought a house. So right around the same time. So I leave in the Osho and I go to Ball State for the 02-03 season. I loved it so much. I bought a house and then got my whole career, what I was aiming for. I got the job at SEC. So I moved to Starkville and I still have this house and I try selling it. I can't sell it. I still have this vivid memory. So this is 04. I'm paying rent in Starkville and trying to pay mortgage in Muncie. And I'm just like, I'm just going to stop paying.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to the bank or the loan, whoever it was. And to your point, during this whole time, they would sell your loan. Like I swear every month I'd get a new one. Like, hey, we bought your loan. Now you owe us.
They
And
make their
whatever.
money.
And I got the, I don't want to say I got scammed because I should have done my homework, things like that, but I had the adjustable rate, so I was like, oh, I can afford this easily. And then after 2 years, I was like, holy crap, I can't afford this. Yeah. I remember like, I'm just going to let it go to foreclosure. I was like, and I did my research. I knew that it would be on your credit for 7 years, but I was like, fine, I just won't buy a house for seven. Like, that literally was my mindset. I was like, I just won't buy a house for 7 years. And I remember being on the phone with the person trying to make me pay the loan in the middle of Mississippi State's track in the infield. And I was like, just do a short sale. A short sale, they would sell your house, however much it sold for. You would be free from your debt, even though you owed more. They would just be like, all right, fine, we got as much as we could. You're free from debt, move on.
Basically, they wrote it off. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, no, you have to pay for it or we're going to foreclose it on you. And I was like, fine. And the person, I can't remember, male or female, she was like, what's going to be on your credit for 7 years? And I was like, and I remember it's so surreal. I'm in the middle of the track practice and I'm on, I have my Motorola Razor and I'm like, cool. I just won't buy a house for 7 years. Like I like, you are not getting another dime for it. I can't afford it. I'm not doing it. I'm done. Yeah. So I always tell people I started the real estate crash when it all came down. You were right there with me, brother. You were on the other side of it.
I was on the phone, going, hey, I can refinance this for you. I don't care if your credit's 540. We can, we can give you a 12% home loan. It's
Have you seen the movie The Big Short?
Oh yeah.
No, it's The Big Short. Yeah, The Big Short. Oh my God. That is one of my favorite movies. Yeah. If you haven't seen The Big Short, you guys got to go watch it. Steve Carell, a bunch of other famous people. Yeah. It's really well done. They explain it. I'm not very smart. They explain it so I can understand all the stuff that was going on. All the stuff David was doing, by the way.
Yeah, that we were doing. We didn't know at the time. I was just happy with those bonuses.
Sure.
The company that I worked for, AmeriQuest, I mean, they were swimming in money. They sponsored the All-Star game and the Super Bowl in the same year. A year later, they were out of business.
Wow.
They were chapter 11, 13, whatever it was they were.
Wow.
We could refinance a home. I was at a call center on the 28th floor of San Felipe Boulevard in the gallery of the Houston area, and we could refinance a loan in 48 hours and have funding on the way to you, all done over the phone, all done on just, you have a $200,000 home you owe $100,000 on. It's worth 300, so we can give you 100 grand in equity. Bam. Yeah. Those numbers, went real fast there, so they may not be correct. But that's anyway. So did that for a little bit. Then I started to have a conscience and I hated what I was doing. I kind of realized
it's okay. I'm glad you said that. I was about to say this is the complete opposite of coaching, by the way.
Complete.
It's masked by I'm helping someone out. In reality, you are fleecing them in this America. Yeah. So I literally was like, oh, this is the opposite.
I figured out, I was like, I'm not putting these people in the best situation like you tell me I am. Yeah, I'm helping them pay their debt off with their home equity, but so I got picked up. I knew I wanted to get back into coaching because it was an April day and I had a cell phone. And I got about 3 phone calls of buddies of mine that were sitting over at the pole vault at Texas Relays looking for me. They're like, "Where you at, man? Where you at? We hadn't seen you." And after about the third one, it was a guy who's still at Air Force today, Scotty Steffen, a dear friend of mine. That he's like, "What are you doing? What do you mean you're not coaching? Are you kidding me?" He's like, "You need to get your butt back out here." And I kind of knew at that time. And plus, what I was doing at AmeriQuest was not a good situation.
Yeah,
so
it's not sustainable.
Friends of mine put me on. There was a company that's out there called Velocity Sports Performance that was started, and I got hired on to help launch the one in Kingwood, Texas. And so I did that for probably about 6 months.
Was that Lauren Seagraves?
Yeah, Lauren Seagraves.
Yeah,
it was great, and I was a Lauren Seagraves guy.
Yeah, same.
Speed Dynamics guy. I mean,
Come on, dude.
Yeah.
These young guys don't understand how great Speed Dynamics 1, Speed Dynamics 2, VCR tapes were.
The Bandit copy of the videotape that
the lines
videotaped off the TV because you couldn't, we all live by
Speed
that.
Dynamics was we don't talk about that a lot in 2024. We've forgotten how that was one of the, that was very instrumental for coaches.
All this new sprint training. Lauren did all that. So he and getting to work with Lauren, he actually stayed at Velocity for a week, while we opened up and did things. I got to learn from him on person. He was great. So I did that for a while, and then the job at Sam Houston opened up. And I was lucky enough to get it. I considered it a stepping stone job to get back into track, and I thought I'd be here 3-4 years and move on. Here I am. I just finished my 20th year at Sam. So I was the assistant here for 5 years, and I got named the head coach in 2009. And it has been a blessing. I get to work in a great place and a great program with people that I love. So
there are a lot of wonderful track podcasts out there, and I promote them all. I love media for our sports, specifically around our coaches. I'm always going to put my weight behind. And, we do things a little different here. So I always tell people, this is a hard podcast to listen to. We're probably on an hour and a half, maybe hour and 40 at this point. And therefore it's a hard podcast to record, by the way. It means I need, time from our guests. I need time from David here, but it's important to me about what we do here and talking about the whole journey, because what a great example, David. When I first started this, I probably, 5 years ago, probably thought, oh, there's an average path to being a head coach. Probably was an athlete, probably GA'd, probably was an assistant for this many years, maybe an assistant at this place for this many years, maybe a smaller school head coach, whatever, there was this path. And what we're learning every single time, and your story is a great example of this, is there is no average path. No one would say, hey, you want to be a head coach of a really good, quote unquote, mid-major, G5, whatever we call the non-power fours, I guess we're down to. You want to be a head coach of that program, then you should get fired, go work in a grain industry, go work. No one would say that, and it's like, oh no, here's the path that it worked out, really by the hand of God moving you here and there. No one would say that's the way to do it, and here we are showing people that when setbacks happen. I love that you said, I got fired. This is now the second time. So now this is my 2 favorite moments. I told you before, one of my favorite moments is when we had Karen Dennis, now retired from the Ohio State University. And I asked her what I thought was a pretty softball question. I knew she went from UNLV to Ohio State. So I said, hey, so why did you leave UNLV to go to Ohio State? Really, it's a dumb question, right? Because it's like, well, it's obvious. First of all, she's from Michigan, so it's closer to home. 2, it's Ohio State, not UNLV. It's a dumb question, right? And she goes, well, I got fired. And I was like, wow, she didn't have to say that. David, you did not have to say that. Like, you could easily have just said, well, Mike, I went to Ohio State because it's Ohio State. Or, you could have been like, yeah, you know what? I got burnt out and family life wasn't great. So I decided to go get away from track or whatever. You could easily have said that. So I'm just humbled by your authenticity and your trust. Because again, it shows other people that bad things can happen. I can get fired. I can not get the job that I thought was my dream job or that I was a shoe-in or whatever, and still have an extremely successful career, extremely positive impact on young people. And, and we're probably going to run out of time here, so we won't get into a lot of stats here, but, Sam Houston sends kids to nationals all the time, all the time. It would be a devastating year if David didn't have kids at nationals. They'd be like, "Oh man, we really screwed it up this year. We just didn't get the
Yeah.
right recruits, and I didn't coach well." It's an expectation
It's an expectation.
David and his staff have there at Sam Houston to take kids to nationals, and loving the process as they go along there. So just want to point that, first of all, again, appreciate your humbleness and authenticity to say that, and also just to show that journey that, if you're out there thinking right now you can't do it, maybe you're out of coaching right now and you're like, yeah, I can't do it, I'm out of coaching. No one will take a guy who's out of the profession. You got to stay in the profession. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true.
Oh, absolutely not true. Yeah.
All right, David, wrap us up. And again, apologize through timing. We couldn't talk a little bit more about Sam Houston and what you guys have built there. It's really quite amazing. It's very impressive. But let's end this with, you have been there for 20 years, which is kind of,
20 years,
it kind of hit me. I didn't realize it'd been that long. It's amazing. It just means I'm old. That's all it means. What's got you excited? I really wanted to talk about this kid that we talked about at Nike, the baseball player. Because what a great
a little bit of wiggle room here.
Oh,
so.
okay. What a great tie into your own baseball background.
Sure.
And I just love the success he's had and things like that. Maybe give us, since we have a little bit of wiggle room, why don't you give us a little bit of synopsis of the status of the program? And I'd love to hear his story, because I think if it's okay to share that,
absolutely.
we'd love for people to hear that. And then we'll end it on what's got you excited, as you look towards 2025, and maybe, you're always thinking ahead. So maybe you're even thinking 27, 28, 29, what's got you excited, but give us kind of an overview of what you guys are building there and have built there.
Yeah. Sam was, it was a program that kind of came back to life in the mid 80s. And so it was just kind of poking along there. When I was a GA here, we were not very good. We were partially funded in every aspect. You think about resources, we didn't have enough. And but managed to get better over time. Those are the things that we have done here. When I got here in 2004, July of 2004 is when I started here. We had a pretty good group. We were still a little bit underfunded, but we were and we're still this way to this day. We're very blue collar. We figure out a way to get things done.
Right.
And we worked really hard. And I was very, very fortunate to be on the coaching staff when Sam Houston won its first ever conference championship in 2005. And the great thing is we won men and women, and we actually did it here at home on our track. And even better, we did it on my birthday. So it was like, okay, there's some, that's kind of the trifecta there. So, got a great start there. And what I love about Sam Houston, this is part of my coaching too, which will tie into Jaden's story here in a little bit that we talked about, is we are a developmental program. Mm-hmm. I love taking young athletes and, through the teaching process and applying the science and, if getting them bought into the program is watching them progress and get better over time. And it's just one of the things that I love, and seeing, going out and recruiting kids that, we'll kind of get into Jaden's story. He was a baseball player that, he got hurt in his junior year, didn't want to have Tommy John surgery. He was a pitcher. And so, he was just kind of stealing bases and doing that kind of stuff. And his baseball coach was like, "Hey, you're kind of fast. Maybe you should think about running track." So he ran track the last couple of seasons, or last couple of meets his junior year. His senior year in high school, he doubled between high school baseball and track. I saw him run at a UIL region meet in Humble. I was like, that kid's he's very, very raw, but he's got some ability. Brought him in, and he's young as it is, because he was, when I saw you at under 20 this year, he just turned 19 and in June, and he, the kid ran 10:26 with a 2.6, a little bit breezy, but still, you run 10:26, that's fast. He ran 20:88 indoors and 6:69 in the 60, and then he ran 10:26 and 20:63 in the 200 outdoors this year. He is a
baseball
true
player.
freshman, the Conference USA champion indoors in the 200. So
Dude.
those are the kind of stories that I love. And he's just now figuring it out. He's just a baby. He's
Right.
just a baby, you know? And he's a great young man. You know, he's not the guy you'd pick out to be a 2063 sprinter.
Right.
Got jeans and starch jeans and boots and a trucker hat on and a mullet hanging out the back. But you know what? He does the things he's got to do, and he's a great kid. So,
That's awesome.
you know, we have progressed. Sam Houston is a school that has grown immensely since I've been here. When I first started here, you know, we were just a little teachers college north of Houston, and we had about 12,000 students. We've got right at 23,000 students now, over 100 different degree plans. We are, so our footprint and our, I don't want to say our mission, but, you know, just our business model has changed a little bit over the years. We were in the Southland Conference for many years. I won a lot of conference championships in the Southland. You know, we had a great successful run. Us and Stephen F. Austin, you know, kind of head to head. You know, Phil does such a great job there, and you know, classy guy and classy program. So, you know, I work at Sam. You know, so you know, Sam Houston and Stephen F. are just bitter enemies. That's oh yeah. If we're not in the same conference, so it's kind of strange now, but we were kind of, you know, both schools named after Texas heroes in the East Texas woods. So, you know, there it goes. So at any rate, Sam moved into the WAC. You know, those things didn't work out in the WAC for us. We're in Conference USA now. We've moved up to FBS football.
Right.
I'm seeing lots of great things happen here. I'm excited about our future. It's a little bumpy right now, but that's what growth is. You know,
That's right. That's right.
That's what growth is. It's bumpy, but I can see, you know, the light is at the end of the tunnel and we're getting closer. And so, you know, like things we talked about, we're in the planning stages of building a brand new track only facility right now, which is very exciting. I've shared a facility my entire career. You know, there's always been other things going on in the infield or other people using it. So this will be the first time that I'll have that. You know, we got to kind of get through a year of building that and the construction that's going on here, but you know, great things at Sam Houston, great things about our department. We have commitment by our president and our board to help us do the things that we need to do. And we all know we're in the industry. That means resources and funding. So they're doing those things for us. You know, I've got a great situation as far as I'm fully resourced, scholarship wise, you know, NCAA Division I level. We are still a mid-major. You know, I have a different business model than Tech and A&M and Baylor. We do things different, you know, but we still compete at a high level. And I'm really, you know, being in Conference USA has given us the opportunity to probably get in some living rooms that beforehand we weren't able to get into, or we had to work really hard to get into those. That, you know, some of that has been a bit easier, but just really excited about the next few years of getting this facility back online, starting hosting things again, and, you know, figuring out, you know, the things that we have to do to be a championship program in Conference USA. And that's kind of our focus, is trying to win a conference championship. That's what I'm basing my team off of. And in order to do that, we're going to have some national level competitors. So we're going to continue sending folks to Austin or Eugene, whichever one it is, you know, you know, so excited about, you know, finalizing my staff. Actually, when we get done here today, I actually have an interview with a coach that is, you know, trying to become a part of our staff. And so looking forward to kind of having a new staff. You know, I was very blessed early on, and I had the same staff for 8 years. We were all together working, you know, nothing changed. We were in sync, and, you know, and it showed. 21 championships later, that's what happened. And let me be the first to tell you, yeah, I get the credit because I'm the head coach, but every single successful head coach is because of their staff. It is their staff. So assistant coaches, you guys are the foundation of what's going on in those programs. So keep at it, keep working hard. And, you know, every dog has his day. You know?
Well, I agree a lot. I'm so happy and excited to hear a lot of what you talk about there. I agree with that last statement about, you know, the assistant coaches. I love the conferences, and I wish all conferences would go to this. Instead of giving out a coach of the year, typically to whoever wins. Sometimes it's not the winning team, but 99% of the time is. I love these conferences that give out coaching staff of the year, because
Yes.
I tell you what, you nailed it. The head coach, and there's amazing head coaches. You're one of them. Mouse, things, guys like that.
Sure.
Beth, there's amazing head coaches, but guess what? It takes the throws coach and the jumps coach and the distance coach and the hurt, whatever. It does take every coach pulling on the same rope to win winning a conference title is hard. It's
Yeah.
the coaching
Pulling on the
staff.
same rope and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point. What I really love that you said there, one of our mantras here, and it's become one of my personal mantras, is healthy things grow. I love how you said, there's some bumps in the road, but that's what growth is. That it made me think about healthy things grow, ... And sometimes that's bumpy. I really like that little addition you've given me there, because you're right. I mean, it's easy to look back and think, oh yeah, it was so easy to get the new track or to get the fully funding or get a staff to stay for 8 years. And you realize, like, oh man,
Yeah.
actually it was tough. There was bumps there. We had to do this. We had to correct here. Thought this was going to work. It didn't. So we had to pivot and do this. It reminds me of that, what's that little cartoon? It says, expectations, and they have like the bike
It's
rider.
not linear.
Yeah. It's just it's from bottom to top. And then it's like reality. It's like, oh, yep,
Yeah.
loops and bumps and everything. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate hearing that. David, thank you so much, man. Again, I think it's important. The main driving force for me personally and for us here at Gill to do this podcast is to show the journeys of these men and women who are track coaches out there. And, it's continually, it's amazing. After 270 of them, you'd think I had heard it all. No one's been a grain elevator worker in the 269 previous or whatever. So that was new. But I do love showing that, we do have a good amount of young people, athletes that are listening to this. It's great for them to hear that, man, it is not going to be linear. There's going to be bumps and ups and downs. But if you continue with your face forward, always towards your North Star, good things will happen. And you also can win a lot of conference championships and things like that. So, David, your story is important, and I'm really grateful for your time and sharing it with us here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, to reaffirm, just thank you for what you do for the sport and the industry. So it's what you do is without measure how valuable it is.
How about we make a deal? You keep coaching, I'll keep uplifting. Is that cool?
Hey, let's do it.
I'll do it. All right. Love it. Well, guys and gals, thank you so much for being here again this week. We had a little bit of a Texas run, right? We had June Villers from Waxahachie here not too long ago. So we've got some pretty good Texas things going on here. Super excited. I think I don't think it's happened yet. You never know when things get published and everything. But the Texas High School Coaches Association over in San Antonio is coming up. I'll be there, MC and hosting the track and field portion there. I'm excited to meet everybody, and more Texas track and field, that's always a good thing. I'm never sad when that's happened. So thank you again for being here. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again. Have a great week, everybody.